She thought she was putting on the performance of a lifetime, yelling at the man in the red hat, like he was the villain in her personal drama. The crowd was filming, the cops were on their way, and Karen was ready for her big victory. But in one moment, everything flipped upside down with a single word. What happened next, you won't want to miss. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and Karen Greenwood, 43, was on a mission. Her usual routine involved a trip to the local supermarket, where she could multitask between shopping for groceries and keeping an eye out for anything or anyone offensive to her delicate sense of justice. With her perfectly ironed light blue jeans, a white blouse that screamed suburban mom, and her signature wireframe glasses perched on her nose, Karen was ready to conquer the day. As she pulled into the parking lot in her pristine beige SUV, she immediately spotted him, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s, standing next to a sleek black SUV. He was calmly loading bags into the trunk, the bright red Make America Great Again hat on his head practically glowing in the morning sun. Karen's jaw tightened. Of course. Another one of asterisk them asterisk, she muttered under her breath, feeling her temperature rise like a boiling kettle. This was her moment. She wasn't just a suburban mom. She was a warrior for the cause of righteousness, armed with her sharp tongue and unshakable sense of entitlement. Karen stepped out of her car, slamming the door behind her for dramatic effect. She strode across the lot like she owned the place, her arms swinging with purpose. The man didn't even notice her at first, which only fueled her determination. She stopped a few feet from him, planting her hands on her hips like a teacher about to scold a misbehaving student. "Excuse me?" Karen's voice rang out, loud enough to turn a few heads. The man glanced up, his expression calm, almost amused. That irritated her even more. "You think it's acceptable to walk around wearing that?" She pointed at his hat like it was some kind of crime scene evidence. "This is 2024, for goodness sake. Take that red rag off your head before I do it for you." The man raised an eyebrow, his face remaining composed. He carefully placed a bag of oranges into his trunk before responding. "Ma'am," he said in an even tone, "I have every right to wear this hat. It's not against the law." Karen felt her blood pressure spike. She clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. "Law? What law? You're inciting hatred just by standing here." Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't care. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" The man paused for a moment, then gave her a slight smile. "And you, ma'am, clearly have no idea who asterisk, Yuri asterisk, talking to." That was it. That smirk, that infuriating, unshakable calm. Karen snapped. She lunged forward, reaching for his hat, her nails glinting like talons. But the man was quicker. He stepped back, easily dodging her grasp, and pulled out his phone. The calm smile on his face was gone, replaced with an expression of quiet determination. "I think this calls for the police," he said coldly, lifting his phone to start recording. Karen's eyes widened. "Oh, no, you don't," she barked. "I'll call them myself." She whipped out her own phone, her fingers trembling with anger as she dialed. "Hello, yes," she barked into the receiver. "There's a man here at the supermarket. He's aggressive and threatening me. He's wearing a red hat, and he's acting like he owns the place." Her voice rose with each word, drawing more attention from the growing crowd of onlookers. The man leaned casually against his SUV, watching her with an expression that was equal parts amusement and pity. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just recorded. As Karen paced back and forth, shouting into her phone and gesturing wildly, the man continued to stand there, calm as a lake on a windless day. The scene had attracted a small audience, shoppers pausing to watch the commotion, some even pulling out their own phones to film. Karen noticed the onlookers and raised her voice, gesturing dramatically toward the man. "You'll regret this," she spat, pointing a shaking finger at him. "You're about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person." The man said nothing. He simply tucked his phone into his pocket and crossed his arms, waiting. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to grow louder. The sound of sirens echoed across the supermarket parking lot as 2 police cars pulled in, lights flashing. A crowd of curious onlookers gathered, many with their phones out, eager to record the unfolding drama. Karen stood front and center, arms crossed and chin high, already picturing the moment when the man in the red hat would be cuffed and dragged away in shame. This was going to be her finest hour. 2 officers stepped out of their cars, their expressions serious. The taller of the 2, wearing sergeant stripes, scanned the scene with a look that said he wasn't here for theatrics. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his tone sharp and professional. Karen wasted no time. She marched up to the officers, gesturing dramatically toward the man in the red hat. "That man," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with outrage. "He threatened me. He's aggressive and trying to intimidate me. You need to do something." The officers turned to the man, who was leaning calmly against his black SUV, phone in hand. His relaxed demeanor was a stark contrast to Karen's performance. "Sir, are you recording this?" the sergeant asked. "Yes, officer," the man replied evenly. "I started recording when this woman attempted to remove my hat without my consent. Everything's on video if you'd like to review it." He held out his phone, and the sergeant took it, playing the video while the younger officer stood by. As the footage rolled, the sergeant's expression tightened. After a few seconds, he handed the phone back and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, based on this video, it appears you initiated the confrontation by trying to forcibly remove this man's property. That's harassment." Karen's face flushed bright red. "That's not true," she protested, her voice rising. "That video is fake. He's dangerous, and you need to arrest him before he hurts someone." The sergeant didn't budge. "Ma'am, the evidence suggests otherwise." Meanwhile, the younger officer, who had been quietly observing, suddenly leaned closer to the man in the red hat. His eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. He whispered something to the sergeant, who froze for a moment before straightening up and adopting a more formal tone. "Sir," the sergeant said, "I apologize for any inconvenience. We'll take care of this immediately." Karen blinked in confusion, her anger momentarily replaced by disbelief. "What do you mean, apologize? He's the one causing problems," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with desperation. The sergeant turned to her, his expression now tinged with irritation. "Ma'am, this man is the Attorney General of the state." The words hit Karen like a bucket of ice water. Her jaw dropped as she stared at the man, who now looked more imposing than ever. The realization that she had just publicly accosted one of the most powerful figures in the state left her momentarily speechless. "You're joking," she stammered. "He can't be." "I suggest you calm down, ma'am," the sergeant said firmly. The man in the red hat remained silent, his calm gaze fixed on Karen as the crowd around them grew larger, murmurs spreading like wildfire. People began to recognize him, and Karen noticed the smirks and whispered laughter from the onlookers. Her stomach churned. This wasn't justice. This was humiliation, and it was all being caught on camera. The situation escalated in the blink of an eye. Karen stood frozen, her indignant confidence replaced by creeping panic as the sergeant turned to her with a sharp look. The growing crowd of onlookers, now openly recording the scene, only added to her mounting dread. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your ID," the sergeant said, his tone firm. "What? My ID? For what?" Karen stammered, her voice higher pitched than she intended. "Ma'am, you're being placed under arrest for physical harassment and disorderly conduct," the sergeant replied, unfazed by her growing hysteria. Karen's eyes widened as the words sank in. "Arrest? You've got to be kidding me. This is outrageous," she shouted, stumbling backwards a step. "He's the one causing trouble, not me." The sergeant remained calm. "Ma'am, the evidence and witness accounts say otherwise. Please, turn around." Click. The sound of the handcuffs locking around her wrists was like a hammer dropping. Karen's face turned red as she twisted to glare at the officers. "This is a mistake, a huge mistake," she yelled, her voice cracking. "He's just some guy in a red hat. There's no way he's the Attorney General." The man in question stood a few feet away, quietly observing the scene with the same calm composure that had unnerved her from the start. Meanwhile, the crowd murmured among themselves, their phones capturing every humiliating moment. Karen could see people whispering, smirking, and some even laughing at her expense. The man finally spoke, his tone measured but firm. "Thank you, officers, for addressing this so quickly. Incidents like this remind us how important it is to treat one another with respect, no matter our differences." The sergeant nodded. "We'll make sure everything is handled appropriately, sir." Karen, however, wasn't done fighting. As she was led to the patrol car, she continued shouting over her shoulder, "This isn't over. You're all going to regret this. He's not who he says he is." But her protests fell on deaf ears. The crowd was too busy uploading their videos, captions like, "Karen versus the Attorney General," and "Instant Karma," already spreading like wildfire across social media. By the time Karen reached the station, her face and voice had gone viral. Millions of views poured in as comments flooded every platform, overwhelmingly in favor of the calm, red hat-wearing man. Viewers praised his restraint and composure, while Karen became the face of entitlement gone wrong. A few days later, the Attorney General addressed the incident in a press conference. Standing before the cameras, he spoke with a steady voice. "This situation serves as a reminder that we must approach our differences with tolerance and respect. Aggression has no place in civil discourse, and we all have a responsibility to ensure that freedom of expression is protected." His words were met with widespread praise, further elevating his public image as a voice of reason. Meanwhile, Karen's world crumbled. She became a nationwide punchline, her name synonymous with public meltdowns. Memes of her dramatic gestures and shouted accusations flooded the internet. Her social circle vanished, and her reputation was beyond repair. Karen had thought she was fighting for justice, but in the end, she became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how quickly one impulsive act can ruin a life. What would you have done in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you, or someone you know, ever faced a similar situation? Let us know. Don't forget to like and share if this story resonated with you. This story was created to shine a light on important issues and inspire kindness and understanding. Together, we can make the world a better place. Your opinion matters.